hospitals. But as we know, Reconstruction, African Americans might have it worse than they did during the war. They're forced into something called sharecropping, right? Very hard for them to make money off of that, a very difficult lifestyle. Tenant farming. In 1865 in Stone Mountain, Georgia, you have the birth of the world's first terrorist organization, the Ku Klux Klan, right? Don't mispronounce that or misspell it. You'll sound like an idiot. Ku, K-U, Klux Klan, not the Klu Klux Klan. That's what kids say all the time. Ku Klux Klan, right? Stone Mountain, Georgia, a terrorist organization to make life difficult for African Americans in the South. Voting, getting jobs, finding housing, all the things that we enjoy equal access to today, African Americans aren't going to get after the war. Life might be worse. Were there lynchings before the war? No. That's your property. You don't kill your slave. Are there lynchings after the war? Yeah, right? So life in the South during Reconstruction isn't easy. Black codes, Jim Crow laws. A black code is a black can't do. Look, think about it like that. It's not a Jim Crow law. A black can't do. Blacks can't be on the streets after 9. Blacks can't marry whites in our state, right? The word can't keeps coming up. A Jim Crow law is establishing something of separate but equal. That comes later, right? So you guys can both drink from this drinking fountain, but that one spits out metallic brown water, and this one is Aquafina pure whatever. Get my point? Separation is Jim Crow. Black code is a can't do, right? All of these are sort of the rule of the South afterwards. So brings us to the end of Reconstruction informally. In 1876, the Hayes-Tilden tie for the presidency. Hayes ends up winning the election. The Republicans are going to end Reconstruction, so the official years on Reconstruction are 1865 to 1877. The new law of the land, though, is that Plessy-Ferguson case in 1896 that establishes the Jim Crow laws, right? And all the way up until the 1950s and 60s, separate but equal is okay. Guys like Booker T. Washington are telling us that we need economic opportunity. We need job training. You've got to teach us how to do something besides farm and crop, right? W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells. We don't need economic rights. We need political rights. We need social rights. And we need economic rights, right? So Booker T., Ida B., W.E.B., all advancing African American rights in the pre-Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks era, right? They established the NAACP, right, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, comprehensive rights for African Americans. They're going to fight against the power structure in the South to try to get African Americans more rights. Okay, as we know, industrialization is happening. That plot sort of gets dropped, but separate but equal is the law of the land, and something will challenge all the way up to Little Rock, Arkansas in '54. You know what I'm saying? That's what causes the civil rights movement that you probably just studied in class. Okay? So if we leave that plot for a second and we get into the most boring you-know-what in American history, it's out west. Mining, ranching, farming. Blah. So 1849, 1850, big gold rush out west, San Francisco 49ers football team, good way to remember it, right? They discover gold in California. All of a sudden, new people start moving out there. Well, there's no reason to move to California until you find a way to make money and currency and economy. Once they find gold, they'll find silver. Eventually, farmers are going to rely on silver to inflate prices of their crops, lower their debt. Ghost towns develop, right? They're here today, they farm all the gold and silver out of the mountains, and they're gone tomorrow, right? So people are going out there to try to get rich. When the mines move, you move, right? All this is made possible because of the octopus, the railroad. The railroad swallows up all the businesses around them, right? The railroad controls shipping prices. The railroad controls trade, right? The railroad controls the economy. 1869, we have a transcontinental railroad that goes from East Coast to West Coast. The Golden Spike is hammered in Utah, right? So by 69, we got a huge growth of railroads. We didn't really build railroads during the Civil War, but after the Civil War, we start turning like heavy industry, right? Farming, there's a Homestead Act. The federal government is selling large tracts of land for cheap to encourage people to get out there, right? New technology allows for dry farming, irrigation systems, the McCormick Reaper basically is pushing small, everyday Joe farmers out and allowing for the big corporate groups of farmers that we see today, right, coming on in. Also out on the frontier, so mining, ranching, farming, Ranching. You know that like pork, it's what's for dinner, or beef, it's what's for dinner commercials? Beef is out now. People are turning to pork. So it's livestock raising and pigs that are people are starting to eat a lot more of. The railroads through Chicago are allowing the movement of the beef and the cattle from Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado to come into Chicago. They get butchered here in Chicago, right? And then we send it out basically to the rest of the world, New York and Boston and the East Coast and whatever. So Chicago's sort of a hub of that movement. The Interstate Commerce Commission tries to regulate some of that. All the railroads have to post their rates. So if you're going from Chicago to Cleveland on a load, you can't just say, that'll be 15 bucks. No, the rates have to be posted, right? They have to be fair. That's why there was a book called The Octopus, and it was written by, I think, Frank Norris about the railroad. The railroad controls a lot of what's going on between the raw products of the West and the finished products in the East, right? They bring them from the West and they turn into finished products, whether it's a hot dog or whether it's a beam of steel, right? During that whole time, the Grange movement, the Populist Party is trying to stick up for the rights of farmers. William Jennings Bryan loses the presidency 3 times. Tough luck. But he's keeping the interest of the farmers at heart, pushing farmers' issue to the forefront. We need silver in the economy. His famous 1896 Cross of Gold speech, you're pinning a farmer to a cross of gold if you don't have silver in the economy. Again, the Eastern industrialists, your Carnegies, your Rockefellers, your J.P. Morgans, they're taking the profits here, and the farmers are getting squeezed out. So the Greenback Party is another one that comes in here during that time. They want more paper money in circulation. The Socialist Party comes in with Eugene V. Debs out of labor unrest, and this whole theme of that workers are getting squeezed out at sort of the head of the big corporations, right, the big money makers. Out of that movement, you've got the triangle. I look at it as a triangle, okay? So immigrants are coming to the country to do what? Germans, Irish, Italians, what are they coming here for? Well, jobs, really, because we have industrialization, right? We've got new ways of building, skyscrapers, 10 stories. The first one in Chicago was the Home Insurance Building. 10 stories, it was a skyscraper, but they're coming for jobs, right, in production. By 1900, the United States becomes the #1 producer of goods in the world. China's past us. But by 1900, we were #1, right? So we've got jobs here in industry. So immigrants, that's the top of the triangle, they come because of industrialization, another I word, right? We're industrializing, we have jobs. And out of industrialization comes urbanization. People start to live where they work. Big cities start to grow a lot. Look at Chicago in the 1870s and 80s. There's nothing there. But once industrialization happens, and remember, industrialization only works because we've got this immigrant workforce willing to do the factory work, right? The 17 cents an hour type of work. Now cities start to really pop up and grow, right? Immigration, industrialization, urbanization. They're all related to each other. Agree? Okay? Now, because of that structure, though, the pushback is you're not treating workers fairly, right? Did you read anything from The Jungle? Yeah. Right? The mistreatment of workers in factories, the unsanitary conditions, the body parts going out into your meat or what have you, right? So unions try to protect the rights of workers, right? So you've got the Knights of Labor. Uriah Stevens is the head of the Knights. It's one giant union of skilled and unskilled workers. Several riots related to the Knights of Labor, 1869, or 1886 rather, the Haymarket Square riot. The American Federation of Labor, led by Samuel Gompers, is another group. They're fighting for shorter hours, better wages, and better working conditions, right? They used boycotts, strikes, sometimes it got ugly. Some unionists were seen as anarchists. They were trying to take over the government, right? Some of that got kind of violent. Haymarket Square in 1886, Haymarket Square riot. You got to know that one. 1892, the Homestead riot in Pennsylvania. You got to know that one. And I love this one just from Chicago. The rail car workers in 1894, the Pullman strikes. Little local history there. Be nice to have. Okay? Government responds negatively to most organized labor strikes, sometimes with force. They bring the police in. We've seen it in Baltimore, right? It's a riot, and they bring the National Guard and the police in to address it. Ultimately, the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890 was supposed to put an end to this big business BS, but it kind of fails, and it's not really enforced. all of this is happening during the period of industrialization. Carnegie Steel, Rockefeller Oil, J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank, anyone's family or you have an account with Chase Bank, that's Morgan. Still Morgan's company today, he's dead. But it's his trust, right? Taking advantage mostly of immigrant workers that now are coming to the country since the war is over. It's safe to come here, right? And for the most part, it's a period of relative isolation. Do you ever hear about other countries during this time period? Not during the Civil War, you don't. Not during industrialization, you don't, right? But all that changes with the Spanish-American War, because the Spanish-American War will thrust the United States into a position of being a world player, right? We had to clean up our own house a little bit in the Civil War. And based on what's going on in the South and the Jim Crow, we didn't do a very good job. But by 1900, when we become the #1 producer of goods, we've got to find markets out there to sell our stuff that we're making. Isn't that how you make money, right? Back then it was to find gold or have a positive trade balance. Or if we're rolling our own cigarettes and we're producing our steel beams that other countries are going to use to build, we got to find countries to sell that stuff in. And that's sort of the motivation, that financial motivation, and also that city on a hill, we're better than you sort of mantra, that America's going to start to look out, right? And that happens when we take the Philippines, Cuba, Guam, and who else from Spain? Puerto Rico, yeah, very good. Okay, so Spanish-American War is like our cutoff point. So I'll talk to Rooney. I need to get into be here tomorrow.